thank you everyone for joining us here at the 48th Annual Symposium of the American Indian. OCO, Nagata. Hello everyone. My name is Ashley Carter, G. Jalagi, and I'm Cherokee. I'm a master's student here at Northeastern State studying higher education leadership and American Indian studies. So this session with Dr. Monte Randall is titled the Native American Leadership Model. And Dr. Randall is Muskogee Creek, and he is the president of the College of the Muskogee Nation. As you probably know, this session is one of many that are included in this year's virtual agenda. Please take the time to visit the website at nsuok.edu/symposium for more details regarding the agenda. All sessions will be recorded and made available in the coming weeks. So Dr. Randall is a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation from the Talladega tribal town in Deer Clan. He is a veteran of the United States Navy and a graduate of Haskell Indian Nations University, the University of Oklahoma, and Oral Roberts University, ORU. His doctoral dissertation correlates the present impacts of historical trauma of Native Americans with the issue of social and emotional disorders. Dr. Randall is the Dean of Academic Affairs at the College of the Muskogee Nation, Associate Professor at ORU, and founder of Muskogee Leadership, a community-based organization focused on cultivating a Native American leadership model for training and mentoring future tribal leaders. Dr. Randall is a 2017 through 18 Andrew W. Mellon Foundation Fellow who serves his community as an advocate for education, youth programs, Native American culture, positive male role modeling, and ending violence against women. Thank you for being here with us, Dr. Randall.
Hello. Estongo Abika Talladega Amadowados Momen Ijoogi Doez Joili Hajoji Johojifkidos Abika Momen Ochiabova Hokola Miko Supko Chogados. Greetings, everyone. My name is Monte Randall. I'm, as mentioned in the opening, my introduction, but I gave it in my Muskogee language. But I am from the Arbika Talladega tribal town, and I am a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. My family churches, Arbika and Hickory Ground number 2 Indian Baptist Church. So just wanted to present that in the Muskogee language as my traditional introduction. So I thank you for being here today, and I appreciate the introduction. So we're gonna talk about the Native American leadership model, and this is something that I've been working on for several years. I've been doing some research on this topic. This is something that I feel is needed within Native American communities. And this is something that is not, there's models for just about everything. So I don't want to say that this is the only model for Native American leadership. This is after years of research. This is something that I have gleaned and pulled together to present to here at this conference, but also within the Muskogee Creek Nation and within the College of the Muskogee Nation. So this is something that I've been working on for some time, and I hope that this will turn into a certificate program here at the College of the Muskogee Nation. So one of the things needed for the Native American leadership model, we got to take a look at the historical trauma, the intergenerational trauma of Native American people, so we can better understand why a leadership model is needed for us. So, just real quickly, we do want to touch on that. We want to touch on the basis for this model. So, as many of you know, you've probably heard several presentations this week and maybe in some of your Native American studies classes about historical trauma, and so it's important that we recognize it as Native American people, that we recognize the intergenerational trauma that has taken place. So as a result of the hundreds of years of colonization in the early history of Americas, not in the entire history of Native American people, but in the early history of the Americas, colonization that destroyed a lot of culture, that appropriated a lot of culture of Native American people, and put us on this path of intergenerational traumas that still exist today. Over the years, the centuries of policies from the United States government imposing policies such as assimilation and extermination and removal, Indian education, termination, relocation. There's countless policies that were aimed at destroying the culture of Native American people. Some, such as the boarding schools, were very detrimental to Native American people, to the culture, to just the basic human nature of people. And that's where we get this actualization of intergenerational trauma that exists today for Native American people. I grew up with, in a household where responsibility was a big part of what we learned. And we rarely got compassion. Not to say that my parents, didn't love us, or they were, they were too harsh on us, but I got a strong sense of responsibility growing up, and that has served me well throughout my life. But the things that I still struggle with, and in my introduction, it talked about the social and emotional issues, the dysfunctional issues. I can understand it now. I can see it a lot better, that I was raised in a dysfunctional household. I was raised, as a result of these intergenerational traumas that had existed. So I mentioned, the compassion wasn't there. I knew that my parents loved me, and I love my parents very much. We just didn't say the words "I love you" to one another, and I think that had a lot to do with our, and that affected our communication later on. And so I still struggle with that, but I understand it, and I recognize it now. So those are some of the things that I try to work on in my professional environment, in my own home environment. Now, as a father, as a husband, I try to work on those things a lot better, as the leader of those, in those areas. So personally and professionally. So this Native American leadership model is very much needed in a lot of areas in our lives, not just at this college, not just at the tribal government level, but in your work environment, whether it's tribal or non-tribal, in your home environment, in your community, in your church environment, in your ceremonial environment. There's a lot of areas where this model is needed for us as Native Americans, and the assimilation portion of these policies stripped that away from us as Native American people. It took leadership from us. That's what it was. That's what these policies were designed to do, to take the leadership, to dismantle governments, the functions, the behaviors, the characteristics, and even the boarding schools. Those were designed to take away the leadership of households. And in doing so, it created those the historical trauma, and what we see now, the intergenerational traumas. You know, my parents, they didn't go to boarding school, but their parents did. So that's that intergenerational trauma that you know, where my grandparents and their parents, you know, experienced boarding schools, or family or relatives of people who did go to boarding schools, and then that effect has gone down the line to where it is today, to where I experienced it as a child. And so the cycle would be for me to continue that experience on to my children, but understanding this is where we have to work on this, and um, you know, take a look at ourselves, and utilize a model such as this, or you know, and again, as I mentioned, this isn't the only model. This is just a take on it that I have done some research, and I'm going to present here. So that's a little bit of the background and the need for this model. And like I said, it can work in your school environment, in your tribal environment, in your work environment, in your family, in your community. So and so as I mentioned that, and as I get ready to get into this and unpack this model, I want to share with everybody that please feel free to use the chat box and ask any questions. I would prefer this to be in person and be able to engage with one another, and engage with the audience, and be able to really get into some discussion on this. But since we are in this virtual setting, please feel free to ask any questions at any time. You know, put it into the chat, and we'll address those as we move forward. So I encourage and I welcome the questions throughout the presentation. So please. So the model that I'm going to present to you today has 4 parts to it, and we're going to go through each one of those, and then we'll come back and we'll summarize this. So 4 parts, and this is designed as self-reflection. So please, you know, as you're listening to this, also kind of reflect on these things, on these points. So the first part we want to talk about is character. So just think about that character. What are your characteristics? How would you describe yourself? If anybody wants to put something in the chat, please feel free. And that'll also help us kind of facilitate this this webinar as well. So what are some characteristics that maybe you have experienced in leaders? What are some of the good characteristics? You may have been around leaders many times in your lives, maybe a coach or a teacher. Maybe it's that boss who went out of their way to get to know people, or you know, can, you know, just, you know, willingness to listen, right? That's a good characteristic to have. Think about those. Think about what are some values, because character is the foundation. Character is the foundation of us as people, and it is what what you need to build off. Being attentive, thank you. Humility, yes, those are good. You definitely need. I like humility. Humility is a good one that I feel is needed, and we see a lot of that. We see a lot of that with our Native American with our Native American leadership. Good communication. We're gonna get to that, Kendall. We're gonna get to communication. I appreciate that. Yes, definitely got to have that. So character for me, some of the character values that I look at are, I like humility, as I said, integrity. Integrity is one that I've always looked at over my life. It's kind of transpired. So at one time I was somebody who needed to be bold, and then I needed to be strong, I felt like. And then where I'm at in my life now and in my position, integrity has been a characteristic that I have taken a hold of and made a part of me, and then that's something that I strive to continue to project, not just understand it, but to know it and live it and project it out. So tolerance, resilience, motivation, thank you, those are all great. Think about the people in your lives, the leaders, who've motivated you. Now also, and we may not, think about this, and of course, if we're in person, I would never ask you to name anybody, but think about somebody or the characteristics or the type of leadership that you don't want to be. Okay, because that helps you too. That helps you get an understanding of who you are and what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of characteristics do you want to present? So you think about the characteristics that you liked, and think about the ones that you didn't like. To think about whatever it is, whatever situation it was in, and you think to yourself, when I become the leader, when I become the coach, or when I become the teacher, those are the things that I'm not going to do. And tuck those away, keep those and tuck those away, because you're going to need that. You're going to reflect on that later on as a leader when you're up front and you're leading the pack. You're going to think about those things. These are the things that I didn't want to do. And it's tough, believe me, it's tough to not do those things, but you'll remember it. And that's part of that. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now, being, having that integrity. Whenever I feel like I'm being that person that I didn't want to be, I recognize it right away. And I think to myself, and that's the integrity piece of it. I think to myself, I got to do better at that. I got to make a mental note whenever I'm talking to people, or I'm engaging with people, the staff members, the students. So I think about those. I think about that a lot of times. So that's the first piece, and I appreciate everybody. So the things that we don't want to do: dishonest, rude, disrespectful, greedy. Those are good. Thank you. You got to look at those and understand where you want to be and where you don't want to be. So that's character. And I would encourage you to at least pick or think of or like I said, tuck away at least one characteristic, one value that you want to be known by, something that describes you. So think about that. Character is the first part. Character is this first one, and think about something, a value or a behavior, and work on that. Think about that, and think about and reflect on whenever you talk to people and when you engage with people. did I present that character? Did I present that characteristic in my manner, in my speech? So think about, so characters is the first thing. Okay. So now we're still kind of working on the individual. So the next part of the model is purpose. Okay. Purpose is also foundational for us. You know, I truly believe that everybody has a purpose in life. Some people, we wander around, and I think about myself. I reflect on myself a lot whenever I present these things, and whenever, again, in my own walks as a leader in this leadership position. So my purpose here, what is my purpose here as the president? What is my purpose as a father? What is my purpose as a son, as a brother, as an uncle, as a ceremonial member, as a church member? And then some of them overlap. Some of these things overlap. But everybody, and this is kind of getting into back to your character a little bit, but it's taking that next step. Okay. What is my purpose here? What is it that I want to do? What are my strengths and my weaknesses? You gotta think back. You gotta think about yourself and really take some time to reflect, on, if your purpose here, and then these things may change. Just like I'm presenting this model to you, and I've already mentioned, this isn't the only model out there. Your purpose may change, just like the development of your character. Your character is going to change over time. So if you're a student now, then your purpose is to read all your assignments, to make sure you go to class, make sure you're completing those assignments, that you're turning them in on time, because your ultimate goal is to complete that class and to graduate. And then your purpose is going to be to get the job or apply for that graduate school, and but to have that career and family. So you can see how these things may overlap at times. But your purpose is what's going to guide you. Your purpose is just as fundamental as your character. And your character is almost going to guide your purpose at times too. Everybody has a purpose here. Everyone is special. Everyone is good at something. Everything is good at something in their lives. And those are the gifts. Those are the gifts that God, Creator, has given us. For me, I've faced a lot of challenges, and I'm overcoming, and I've overcame a lot of challenges in my life. And at one time, I didn't think I had a purpose, but it was always there. It was always there, and it took me some time to find that. And once it was revealed, once I could see it, then I knew exactly where I was going. So purpose is your guidepost. Stay on task, stay on your purpose. And Sean Day, thank you. Yes, formulating those characteristics into purpose, philosophy, actions, advice, communication, etc. Okay, so that was the second point. Character, purpose. Our third point on this model is community. Okay, so the first two, you can see we were kind of looking at ourselves character and purpose. And now the third point on our model is community. So we're starting to engage. We're starting to get out there and lead people, talk to people. And so for me, community, it's a combination of two things: communication and unity. Communication and unity. So for me, again, I mentioned the historical trauma, the intergenerational trauma, and I've had to consciously work on communication in my life. I've had to work on communication as a leader. Whenever I was starting here at the College of Muskogee Nation and I started to move up into a dean position, had a sticky note. One of the things that I would write on my sticky note, and I'll write it here. This isn't the exact one that I had, but here's what. So in my penmanship, but I don't know if you can really see that or not with my background, I guess. But it says, tell people what you are doing. And I would put that right on my monitor screen, stick that to my monitor screen. So that way, anytime I was doing something or I was going somewhere or developing something or whatever it was, I would see that sticky note and I would know that I needed to tell people what I was doing. I needed to include people. I needed to engage them specifically and intentionally to communicate with them. And this was my staff members, because one of the things I felt like I had a strong purpose. I felt like I had a lot of good ideas in my mind, but one of my weaknesses was that I wasn't communicating those out to everybody. So I had good ideas, but I, and I could follow through with them. But the thing of it was, whenever I got too busy, whenever I had too many things going, and then I would come back and think, okay, how come this didn't get done? Well, because I didn't communicate that to anybody. I didn't tell anybody what the plan was. The plan was still up here, and I was pretty good at getting things done by myself. I was pretty good of making things happen in my life. But as a leader, I needed to involve people. Intentionally involve people, intentionally involve your staff whenever, as much as you can as a leader. Communicate to them, communicate your thoughts, communicate your intentions, communicate your ideas, listen. And that's part of that unity again, intentionally involving people, listen to them. That was one of the characteristics we heard about. Your humility will come through when you do these things. Your honesty, your integrity, your responsibility, these things will come out. These characteristics, whenever we take the time to build that foundation and reflect on who we are as individuals, as people, as humans, and then, and as Native people, as Native ceremonial members, as church members, as community members, as family members, as kinfolk, these things will start to layer on top of each other. And then whenever we need to engage our community, then we can intentionally involve people through communication, and that builds that unity. I mean, you wouldn't, the way that brings people in. People want to be involved. Your staff wants to be involved. Your family wants to be involved. They want to be involved with you in these things that you're doing. So to intentionally bring them in and communicate with them, that's key. This is one of the key things that we need to do. So we've talked about character, purpose, community, building community. And then our last piece of this model is excellence. Okay, so excellence is this one's a little more abstract. Where the other ones, I think, I think we can wrap our minds around some of these others, but excellence. And usually I'm not one to quote things, but out of high school, I remember for graduation, I got this book of quotes, and I read through it, and I went through them, and they were all, some cliche and this and that. But the one that really stuck out to me, it said, strive for excellence over perfection. And I thought about that for years. I thought about that. I thought about that quote. What is that? And first I was like, what, isn't that the same thing? What does that even mean? And then after a while, I really looked at that quote, and I thought about those words. What do those two words mean? Perfection and excellence. I hear different, other characteristics maybe of a perfectionist. Somebody, and I'm not trying to knock anybody or shame anybody. It's just, because I think I've been there before. I think I've been the perfectionist who, everything has to line up, or be in its box, or whatever it is, not out, inside the lines and all that kind of stuff. And and then as I started to think about that, excellence over perfection, what does that mean? And really what it came down to me was, and this may sound cliche too, but you're doing your best. Maybe it's not 10 out of 10, but if you're best, if you do everything that you can do to study, to write that paper, to make yourself the very best that you can, if you give all of that effort, and maybe your grade is 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, but you gave it everything you had, then that is that excellence. Excellence is, it's, and then even it may even be that it's more than enough. Maybe it's not that 10 out of 10. Maybe it's somehow you're overachieving. You get so good, you get so skilled at something that you're able to just do it excellent every time, or more than enough. You're getting so good that now, at my homework, I'm able to write a paper in 20 minutes. I can put these words together, no problem. I can MLA format, APA, whatever it is. I've already got that down. I've got a skill set where I can do, whatever it is, that is that excellence. And again, it's almost that cycle, so the commitment to excellence. Thank you. Yes, excellence is non-competitive. That's exactly right. I think that's a good example right there. Excellence is non-competitive. It's yourself. You're looking into yourself. That is a great way of self-reflection. Joseph, a high school mentor of mine, used to say, excellence is never an accident. When we work hard, prepare, and are determined, we produce excellent work. That's right. Those are the things, and you start to build that skill set within yourself. You start to expect, I'm going to work hard every day, whether it's athletics, whether it's sprinting or shooting the basketball, or whatever it is. You start out with building that habit, and then that becomes that muscle memory, and then that muscle memory starts to get stronger, and then that's where that excellence comes out, where that continues. So with all of these, you have to apply each one. It's layered, but it's almost in a cycle. You can turn it upside down. Excellence. I gotta continue to reflect on my character. Like I said, my word that described me, or that behavior or that mindset that described me over the years, has changed from being bold to being courageous and strong, and to integrity, to where I am today, to responsibility. Those are some of the words that I use now, but I keep coming back to integrity right now, and I keep reevaluating that. Is that who I am? Is it time for me to progress to something else? And I keep thinking about that, and I keep feeling like, no, this is where I'm at right now. Integrity. So I've been on integrity for several years now, and I continue to reevaluate that. I continue to evaluate my character, and my behaviors. At night I take time for myself, and I go to the track. I go to the high school track in Glenpool, and sometimes I walk and sometimes I run, but I'm usually thinking about my interactions that day. I usually think about, how did I engage somebody? How do I talk to somebody? How did I, that email that I sent, email, no, that's a little different, because you have a little bit more time on those. But I usually think about, how did I talk to that person, or how did I talk to my staff today, or how did I talk to students, or whatever it is. I kind of reflect on that. I reflect on that at night, when it's just me, and I'm out there doing something physical, and that kind of puts me at peace. And then I come back to my purpose. Was that a part, what I said to that person, or how I engaged them, or how did I act? Did that reflect who I am and my purpose? And I think about that. Did I intentionally engage people today? Did I build community? Did I communicate effectively? And that's all part of that excellence. That's all part of how I prepare for the next day, and how I reflect on what has taken place. So those are the 4 points. And again, there's models out there for just about anything. I'm not saying that this is the only one. This is something that I've gone through different phases, and I've reflected on, and I've done some research on, and I've spent time in the communities. And at one time, I was, for this, I had my journal, and whenever I would be around different elders in the community, or different coaches, or different teachers, or different presentations, or whatever it was, I would just write something, whatever they said, that I would just write it down. Okay, that's a good point. That's something that needs to be in character. That's something in purpose. And I kept reflecting on that. So this has been something that I've pulled together, that I've gleaned from other presentations, from other research, from other readings, and things like that. And so this is what I've pulled together, and that I use for myself, and I try to share that. So these are the 4 points: character, purpose, community, and excellence of this Native American leadership model. And I use it through culture, integrity, fachita. I think about that word integrity, but then I think about fachita, the Muskogee word, and it's not a direct translation. So there's some different values in Fachita. It's different whenever you say it, but it still means truthfulness, integrity. It still means reliability. So I take all of this through a lens of culture, purpose. Here as a father, as a Muskogee man, teaching my children, leading my family, through the teachings that I've seen at the ceremonial grounds, through the teachings that I've seen all my life growing up at our churches. And that filters through, these points filter through my culture and through who I am, through my language, through my actions. So that's how I've come to this model, and I'm glad that you're all here, and I'm happy to share it with everybody. And this work will continue, and I hope that someday we see a certificate program here at the College of Muskogee Nation, that we can dive down deeper into these points and create lesson plans and curriculum based off of this, and share this with more people, and get our tribal leadership and our community leadership and to take part in this type of self-reflection. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
And thank you, Dr. Randall, for sharing your model with us and what you're doing over at the Muskogee Nation. And I'm actually involved in one of the leadership certificates with Cherokee Nation.
Okay, good.
And it's been really awesome and really informative. And I think that would be really interesting to further develop the curriculum and lesson plans. And I've tuned into some of the Muskogee leadership that you have for the youth, and that's very empowering too. And another great way to connect on the web with COVID. But I had a question for you. You talked about, developing the certificate. Do you have any other goals or future plans for your leadership model, your Native American leadership model?
Right now, what I'm working on would be the senior leadership here at the College of the Muskogee Nation. So our deans and our registrar and a couple other key executive positions. So I'm going to start to bring them in, and we're going to use this model as a form of professional development. So, and the part of inclusion is that I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to present it, but then I'm going to bring them in, because there are, these individuals, they're established professionals already. And so I'm gonna utilize their expertise and their knowledge, and I'm gonna have them present to us at times. So we're gonna share. It's not just gonna be me up there presenting, my thoughts and my ideas. I want to learn from them as well. And that's that part of excellence. We need to understand that's part of that character trait of humility. We need to understand, that hey, there's a lot of great leaders here. There's a lot of great people with a lot of great ideas that we can learn from. So that's the direction of this leadership model in the immediate future, is that I'm going to use that to develop the executive team here at the College of Muskogee Nation.
That's great. I'm excited too, just to hear about these big plans. Hope it all goes excellent. So we do have a question, it looks like, or a comment, and it says, I am interested in hearing more about what you think about the importance of listening.
Yeah, I feel like that's in those layers, characteristics, your character, your character traits. Again, that's a crucial part of the community, the communication. Communication isn't one way. Communication is two ways. So very important part of listening, you know, to be an active listener, not just to sit there and hear the things, you know, but to be an active listener, you know, means that your mind is focused on what the people are saying, what that person is saying to you, so that way you can fully understand it, you know. And a good way of active listening, you know, is to summarize and to repeat what that person has said, you know, especially, you know, if you're, you know, some exercises are, you know, maybe taking directions or orders, you know. So somebody's giving you directions, then you internalize it, and then you kind of repeat it, so that way, you know, you know, or they know that it is understood. So listening is very important.
I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Looks like there's a comment in the Q&A. It says, excellence seems too white. Wisdom seems more valuable of Native leadership. Do you have?
That's a good comment. I mean, wisdom, you know, hobothinga, you know, I don't know of a Muskogee word for excellence. That's good. Thank you for that point. And it's just more personal, I think, for me. Like I said, I mean, excellence was a part of my life for so long, you know, that I thought about it for so long in my life. So again, this model, again, this isn't the only model, you know. You know, if wisdom fits for you, then yes, you know, hobothinga, wisdom in the Muskogee language. I like that. I like that core value a lot too. But again, to make it more personal to me, like I said, excellence has just always been a part of my life, I guess you could say.
I also just wanted to make a comment. It was my grandmother that says, wisdom is knowledge plus experience that transforms.
Absolutely. It sure is. I agree with that. I do agree with that. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, it was just, for me, it was, you know, it was more personal, you know, because I carried that excellence, you know, for so long in my life. That's why that came out. But I certainly agree with that too. Wisdom is experience, you know. Thank you.
Yes, Mado, thank you, Dr. Randall, so much for your sharing your time with us and sharing your Native American leadership model. And hopefully we can all take lessons and apply those lessons in our roles.